That's a common thing that blows away.
It's the I button. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Info, not because of
John.
No,
I used
info,
to-
not record.
Really?
The I button.
I'm sorry.
What's an I button?
There should be a button that has like a little eye on it.
What?
Nah, don't worry about it.
What's an I button?
A button with an eye on it. Or no, yeah, an eye. No,
Like the letter,
Not like-
no, like an eye.
No, I'm trying to get the record off the screen. There should be a information button where it says like,
Like menu?
take it across to the left. Info? No, that's not doing anything? Okay. Just don't worry about it. I could have recorded it here instead of you recording it on the video. But don't worry about it.
John, do you know
Because
where
now we're gonna have.
Oh, I see what you mean.
You know where
You don't, we don't do that.
I don't
I
know.
got you, I got you. I'm done.
Now stop recording.
So we good?
Yeah.
Are you still live?
Yeah.
Could be inside your booth or not?
Okay. I guess I'm gonna hand.
Right. Yeah. It's the faceplate. It's your faceplate.
Yeah.
Faceplate is for the beat bit. Are you
You live?
That's what I was checking.
Yo!
How
you doing? Yeah, you're welcome.
Yo, what's up, Serge? There's mad fun people in here.
You said it's on Bravo's, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I figure if we give it time, or eventually like clear stuff out, pretty sure
We lost a faceplate.
I don't wanna go through these bags here. No. Possibly. Yeah, I'm sure it'll pop.
Just saying the audio is wonky.
Yeah, no, I think we'll find it. Yeah.
Keep finding bits of plastic that aren't it.
Yeah. I mean, it's white, so did you see it?
Is that everybody?
It's not too hard. See, I mean, luckily.
You watch it.
Yeah, mine's so sweet.
Well, it's now just I know. He's supposed to be. And I'm supposed to go in there.
I mean, I didn't see it.
Oh, John's
Started.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
How is everybody today? Everybody having a good time?
All right.
Good, good. Thanks for joining us to talk about Gundam model kits.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Awesome, what a fair exchange, I love it. So obviously if you're in the room right now, you're somewhat interested in learning how to build a model kit. You've seen one in a booth or something like that, and you're curious about it. So how many people here have actually watched Gundam, seen Gundam, already know what Gundam is? Yeah? Ish? Alright. Slide me, please. Slide me again. Please. So Gundam is an anime that aired in 1979. It's about giant robots, specifically real robots versus super robots. Meaning that they're about giant mechanized robots that have like gears and parts, and they twist and turn, they clank, they have weight to them. They're not just doing backflips all over the place, depending on which show you watch, I guess. There's a whole lot of animated different series and graphic novels, and basically the overall premise, which doesn't particularly matter to this hobby, is that war is bad. It's a drama show. I highly recommend a lot of the series. So the thing with Gundam, and I'll get to the crux of this in a moment, but there's a lot of different shows. I don't know how many shows is there now. 42 different shows, or something like that, around there.
Other series.
There's like one main timeline. There's like one main timeline where a lot of the events take place with sequels and stuff, and I wouldn't recommend picking any random show in that, but there's a whole bunch of standalone TV shows, like back in the day, Gundam Wing was really popular. Good old Toonami. And those are like standalone shows, so you can just watch those and not know what's going on. But the reason I talk about the shows is because when you watch a show, you'll either you like it or what or not, and you'll find a mobile suit or a Gundam in it that you think it looks really cool. And the point of the matter is that it probably has a kit of it, because they made a kit for nearly almost everything. So whatever one you like, you can probably find. Now, when it comes to what to look at when you're buying a kit, the kits come in different grades, which roughly stands for difficulty or amount of parts or complexity or time it will take to complete. The easiest thing to build would be like a BB. SD stands for super deformed. These little like micro guys. They have like really strange limbs, giant heads, super easy to make. Chibis, yep, they come in tiny little boxes. Then the next grade up, what's called a high grade. This is what I recommend to everybody for a beginner if you're trying to get interested in something. High grade is excellent because you're going to find a bunch of that stuff for any model kit.
You're good.
No, I know. Stop talking. What? Stop talking. So high grades have like the most kits, and you'll find pretty much anything you want in the high grade line. It's by far the most popular and it's the most beginner friendly. And that is in the 1/44th scale, which literally translates to if you built this model kit and it's 5 to 6 inches tall, if you stack 144 of them on top of each other, that would be the real size of the real robot in the television show. That's what the scale means. Now the next grade up, or like kind of like a lateral grade, would be something called the real grade. All these boxes are labeled with these letters in usually the top left corner of the box, an HG for a high grade or an RG for a real grade. I don't recommend a real grade to any beginner. They're pretty complicated and difficult, but they can be a little confusing sometimes because the box is roughly the same size and you might mistake it for a high grade. But they're pretty complicated, but you work your way up there and they're personally my favorite. Beyond that, the next grade is a master grade, a 1 to 100 scale, so they're a lot bigger and they're a lot more complex and they're a lot more complex, and you'll eventually work your way up to that. There's really a higher price point. The high grades and the SDs are very, very cheap and really easy to get into, especially for a beginner. And the master grades is where the prices start kind of going up. But I wouldn't worry about that or the grade above, the perfect grade for a beginner. So the high grades, they have decent detail without too many parts. A lot when you get like an older kit, because they all have like the year they were made on the box. An older kit might be a little easier to put together, but it'll have a lot less detail. But if you like the way it looks, you're gonna love it. Very beginner build friendly. Pretty good color separation. When I say color separation, I mean like if something's supposed to be 2 colors, it's actually 2 different parts to give that color look. And sometimes in high grade, they use a lot of stickers to make up for that color correcting. You know, like if this little triangle on the guy's shoulder is supposed to be yellow, they might give you a sticker for that in a high grade. We'll get into why that matters a little bit later. Generally a really low price point, but I have a huge selection of different models. There's a lot of Gundams from the shows. I can't really think of any that don't actually have a kit already. So whatever you like or whatever you think is really cool, you'll probably find something of it. The RE100 is like a specialty line. It's just a bigger scale, but it's of the same complexity as a high grade. The boxes are a little bigger, and sometimes you find something you like and it's a bigger size, but it's not quite a master grade, so it's a lot easier to make. Master grade is usually really highly detailed. This is more of like a medium build difficulty. I would like think about one of these after your 10th high grade or so, or if you feel like you really want to make the jump. With the techniques we're going to show you today, you can still build it if you happen to have one already, or it was the first thing you bought. There's no reason you can't build it. It's just a lot more parts and a lot more complex. But if you build a couple of high grades and you build a master grade, you'll probably almost immediately fall in love with the complexity and the inner frame that they usually have. It's really, really cool. The real grade, like I said, is a little more on the complex side. Lots of really tiny pieces. So I would personally try to avoid this if you're not quite nimble enough with your fingers yet. But they do look the best when completed.
I think the best way to relate a real grade is that if you're taking the master grade size from the 7 to 8 inches and shrinking it down to that 5-inch size, you're still getting a lot of really amazing detail, really awesome articulation, a lot of really cool gimmicks too. However, it's still going to be a little bit more difficult because they're still smaller parts.
The SD, super easy. Usually like a 30-minute to an hour build if you're really kind of going through it. They have this little box.
This little box.
Usually people get them when they really like it or they really think it's cool looking because they're very stylized, not for everybody. And they generally usually have a lot of stickers, so there's kind of a lot more work in it in just a different way. And here's an example of some SDs. That's the RX-78-2, what we call him the Grandpa Gundam, because he's like the first one. On the left, you might hear that term a lot, the Grandpa. And then here's what an example of like one that's like super stylized. You might actually find like this kit somewhere else, and if you think it looks really cool, you should go for it. But it's probably a lot of stickers. And then the perfect grade is kind of like the head honcho, the biggest thing you can get. Obviously the most expensive. The largest is 1/60th scale. Phenomenal color separation. The coolest thing you'll ever build. Very difficult. Takes a really long time. Mine took about 40 hours or so to build my unicorn. It's a really long time. I don't really recommend that for beginners.
Yeah, don't start here.
Don't start there. And just some example of perfect grades. A lot of them come with lights and LEDs, so they look really cool. If you manage to build one of these or know somebody that has one, it's going to be the center point of your collection for forever almost. Here's a little size comparison. This being a high grade right here on the far right. And then at the 1/44th scale. And then when you go to the 1/100th scale, like this one right here, this is a master grade. And this would be what a perfect grade looks like in comparison.
From size to scale, you're looking at 5 inches to 7 inches, and then into the perfect grade, you're looking at over a foot to 16 inches tall.
Especially the unicorn. He's a tall guy.
All right, so now that we've kind of gotten an idea of the sizes, the different types of grades, now we're going to take a look at a little bit of the tools. So the list of tools that we have listed here are going to be nippers, the hobby knife, the tweezers, and the files. And in this particular order, I would highly recommend always having a really nice set of nippers. You can start off with anything basic, of course, anything with a little bit of a spring to it. We'll go over how to cut them later on, but these can range from anywhere between $5 all the way up to about $80 if you really want to get a little more in depth and detail. The hobby knife, also a really great tool as well. Really trying to get a lot of there's a little bit of material called the gate material that's usually left over when you cut out each piece. And you can use a hobby knife to cut that down just a little bit further and give it a little bit more fit. Tweezers, stickers are the hardest thing to put on. I mean, it can be, but it is still pretty difficult to put on. So utilizing tweezers by putting them on a little bit of a tip, sliding them into the exact spot, and it'll be really easy to go. Last but not least, the files. Sometimes when you have that gate material and it's taut right here, you can actually sand that down as well, and it can come in a lot of different grits. You can start as low as 320 or 200 if you like, all the way up to, if you wanted to, 3, 4, 5, up to 10,000 if you want. But those are going to be a little bit more on if you really want to make this kit unbelievable. So right over here, going into it a little bit deeper, into nippers. So if you look left to right, you're going to notice that there's this little bit of a discoloration towards the middle, or towards the bottom right over here. So those are stress fractures, and also that discoloration is known as frosting. So when that happens, you either probably damaged or destroyed a piece. And there are multiple ways to cut that, but if you get a little bit more of a nicer set of nippers, as you go down, the less amount of force that you're going to need to put on the plastic and less frosting. So you'll see that we have some basic nippers here. There are brands from Tamiya to Godhand, Hobby Neo, and a few others that are available, and they're all really easy. Like we already have some Godhands right over here on this side too. They cut like butter, by the way.
Yeah. Having a really high quality pair of nippers is, yeah, just be careful with them.
Yeah, just be extremely, extremely careful.
Having a really high quality pair of nippers is going to make your life a lot easier, but it is by no means required whatsoever. You can build anything with like the lowest pair of nippers. I just wouldn't recommend the toenail clippers.
Yeah.
You can do a little bit better than that.
Yeah, you can. Totally. So you can start off with something like a little bit of basic here, and then you can go into something like this.
Yes. Tweezers, nothing really too special about tweezers. Sometimes they have like an angle on them, and that could be useful for getting around a little curve, or just give you, depending on how you want to hold the tweezers, give you more leverage and how to put a sticker on. But generally, for the most part, tweezers is kind of like whatever you got lying around. They don't need to be anything special. There's no sense in buying some crazy marked up tweezers just to put a sticker on. As long as you can clamp and grab things, that's more than enough.
Hobby knife. So one of my favorite tools here, especially when you're trying to really make a piece nice and level. So my recommendation usually is, doesn't matter usually the handle. The handle's more about a comfort level for you if you want to hold it like a pencil. Sometimes it can be really long, sometimes it can be really short. It's usually the blade that you really want to worry about. Sharper the blade, the easier it is to work. So if you go like I do, anything that is dull in a kitchen doesn't help you. And it makes it really hard to do a lot of things. So the sharper the knife or sharper the brand you use, I recommend Tamiya's blades are really, really nice. And then you go from there. But that also makes it so that way you can really go in and really make those accurate cuts. And of course, the files. So files can range in different shapes and sizes too, and these can also either be adding any kind of sandpaper onto them too. You can get any kind of packs similar to these. Sometimes you'll actually use these for any of your gate materials when they have some a little bit left over, but depending on how you do it, if you're going to be standing back and forth, you may do a little bit more damage than you want to on the piece. So you may want to also consider going back and forth in the same forward motion. But you can pick any one of those, they're all really great. I utilize a lot of the gun primer tool line. I also use the God Hand sanding sticks as well. So there you go. Appreciate those ones too.
So when it comes to the manual, the first time you open the manual, and maybe because they're like folded up like a pamphlet, it's going to look extremely confusing and daunting and kind of terrifying. But it's not at all. And a lot of people are really concerned that most of the stuff's in a different language. Also doesn't matter whatsoever. The only thing, yeah, open that up.
I'll walk around.
It looks like a lot of information, but really it's not that bad. And you don't need to read anything. All you gotta do is follow the pictures and the symbols. It's kind of like building Legos, but like easier than Legos, in my opinion. The only thing that you really need to pay attention to is like the symbols in the instruction booklet, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Like right here, this is referencing a sticker that you need to apply, and then the sticker is just number 1. At times 2, just do this step twice. The exclamation point is just trying to get your attention to look at something and pay attention to what you're doing because it's an important step. The black diamond with the number 1 is just telling you what order to go in. I have a further picture that I'll explain. And then all these are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the newer kids are actually having translations. So you'll see like the other language and then you'll see English that explains it so you don't get lost. Oh, there's no gluing of anything. There's no glue required if anybody was concerned about that. It depends on the kit. Some of the really, really old ones might need some glue, but for the most part, as long as you go really careful and you don't break anything, no glue is usually required. Everything snap fit, it'll stay together on its own.
Well, that's like the gun, MG, gun, G Gundams. Those have screws.
Yeah, but not glue.
So as far as paying attention to a lot of your symbols, who's played Battleship? Who's played Bingo? Great, you know how to build a kit. So one of my favorite parts about this is that there are sheets of these plastic parts known as runners. If you take a look, there is a letter associated to them and a number associated to them as well. When you look for a kit, or when you're looking at this piece, so for example, this is F14, we're looking on runner F and part number 14, so they're all labeled for you. Some of these are also going to tell you, like this warning sign here, telling you like, hey, pay attention to this. There's an orientation to how it's supposed to be either facing you or away from you. So there's also these numbers in these diamonds as well that indicate how to put them on first and the order of which they fit. So with this piece being the main piece here, have that one, have this bottom H2 piece slide into the front first and then connect them together. This one on the bottom here is just telling you that this is a piece that's oriented towards the front. So this is going to be facing upward towards you, that's pointing towards you. So here's an example. We have this runner right over here. You'll see on the top corner, on newer kits, you'll see them actually cut out. That'll tell you which of the runner letters there are. In these little tiny squares as well, I'll walk over there for you. In these little tiny squares, it'll tell you the actual part. So in this case, if I'm pointing to this piece right here, this would be runner F.
Yeah, I would assume so, particularly like if that's gonna be the base of.
So again, pretty much like pretty much like. And of course, bingo, you don't spell F, but
It's just like a liquid piece.
Here's an example of finding a part on a runner like we were just going over. This runner is labeled C. In this excerpt from the instructions, looking for part C1. So I find my runner labeled C, and I look for the little square that has a number on it. This is part C1, so this is the part I'm going to be using to perform that step. And then further on with that, we got like a little black diamond, so it wants to put this piece in first. And then number 2, slide this piece down into this piece, and then attaches to the what you're working on.
cutting parts from a runner. So there's always this saying, measure twice, cut once, right? Cut twice here. So there are two parts to this. Again, when we were explaining a little bit ago, so in the injection molding process, there's going to be this little portion of plastic that's hidden pretty close to the piece called the gate. So what you'll then do, and I'm going to pass this around back up there, is when you cut away from the piece first, and then you'll do your cleanup afterwards. So you'll have the piece right over here where my hand is. This would be the gate. Cut away from the gate first. And then once the piece is entirely off, then you go in and do a little bit more detailed cuts. If you're wanting to sand or file it, sand and file it if you like to. Use your hobby knife, however you see fit. But again, always cut first.
Yep. The left picture being an example of what it probably would look like if you cut it out in that manner, leaving a little bit of plastic left over. Then from there, like you said, you would either file or sand if that's the option you want to go, or slowly use a knife to chip away the excess until you're flat against the part. And you go through that longer process so that your part comes out clean. You don't have any of those stress fractures we were talking about earlier on the piece, and then everything fits together appropriately.
I don't know how much it's gonna do, honestly.
And that's all you need to know. With that knowledge, you can build any kit out there pretty much. Anybody have any questions about anything? Yes?
By any chance, do you have any toolkits like your booth?
But you know, you're doing wrong things together.
Yes.
There were a couple left.
There were a couple left. If you have a kit and you want to
There were
practice,
nippers available, and we also loan out nippers here in the room. So if you were happen to grab a kit, you can come up here, we have nippers here.
yes.
By the way, I have some of your nippers from yesterday, so I'd like to return those.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any other questions?
More nippers that belong to us.
Yeah.
Sorry.